This is Peter Walsh with M&R.
Scott Ritter with the Decorated Apparel Expo.
This is Ben Landesman with Lawson Screen and Digital Products.
This is Deborah Sexton.
And you're listening to the Two Regular Guys podcast. Hosted by Terry Combs
and Aaron Montgomery.
All right. Well, welcome to the show. It is Friday, March 5th, 2021. I am Terry Combs, and you can find me at terrycombs.com.
And I'm Aaron Montgomery, and you can find me over at our Success Group. Today, Terry, we're going to be joined by Ray Weiss from Printing United. Did I just do it wrong?
No, you did it right.
See, now I got my own head. All right. Ray from Printing United Alliance is going to be joining us, along with Jim Raffel, who's with ColorCaster and ColorMetrix Technology. And we even saw a little prelim. They brought like props and stuff, man. This is going to be cool. We're going to talk.
Where do they get those amazing toys?
yeah, exactly. So if you're listening to the
Joker,
so if you're listening to the podcast version of this, make sure you come over to our Facebook page at facebook.com/2regularguys and check out the video version as well. But we'll talk through what they're showing on screen. But we're going to be talking today about color management, specifically in the digital world of DTG and sublimation. So really excited to be having this chat here this morning, Terry.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And it's a subject I don't think we've talked about here on the show before, Aaron.
Yeah, it's not something that we've covered a whole lot. And so looking forward to doing this. So I'm not sure what's going on with my mic. So let me figure that out. Is it a little bit low, Terry? Is that what's going on?
No, I can hear you perfectly fine. It sounds like a little tinny, but I can hear you perfectly fine, and you're good. So
okay, all right. Well, we'll figure it out as we go here, and yeah, I'm on the same stuff. So we'll see what's too hot here. Okay, but with that, in fact, Jim Kazikas says color management is a nightmare at times. So.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of folks, it doesn't matter until, Tony's Lawn Tractors comes in and says, I sell John Deere lawn tractors and my logo is John Deere green. And then all of a sudden, green is not green anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I like that blue, Terry. And then you go, okay, what shade of blue? Right.
I have literally had work orders come onto my production floor with the word blue. That's when you go and get the sales rep. Come out to the ink room with me. I want to show you something. See this wall? These are blue. From the lightest of blues to the darkest of blues.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, before we get to that, Terry, we've got a little bit of news stuff. Obviously, trade shows are changing, as I believe we all know. But would you give us the update here, Terry?
Yeah, as of today, and I was, we were talking just the other day about we should probably do an update on trade shows because there's been so much movement and change. So listen carefully as some of our menu items have changed. For sales, press 1. Some shows have been canceled, by the way, for 2021. So that's kind of what spurred this along. But GPX, which is Graphics Pro Expo, which is formerly the MBM show, and we're talking about this because it's been a year since these transitions, so some people probably don't even know still a year later. But the one in Irving, Texas is May 13th and 15th, or 13th through 15th. GPX Indianapolis, June 15th through 17th, which is a midweek show. DAX Kansas City has moved to July 9th and 10th. GPX Meadowlands, which is Secaucus, New Jersey, which is, if you don't know where that is, if you ever took the train to New York, that's where you change trains for that last 10 minutes. That is July 15th and 16th. DAX, Minnesota, August 3rd and 4th. That also is a midweek show. GPX Long Beach, California, August 12th through 14th. Impressions Expo, most of us know, formerly the ISS show, Atlantic City, New Jersey, August 26th through 28th. DAX Chicagoland, which is Tinley Park, August 27th and 28th. Impressions Expo Fort Worth, Texas, September 10th through 12th. I believe that one has not changed. GPX Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, September 24th and 25th. Printing United in Orlando will be October 6th through 8th. And GPX Charlotte, North Carolina, October 29th through 30th. And One big show that has been moved back a couple of times, Impressions Expo Long Beach, has officially been canceled until January of next year. So that is the show update as of today.
Yeah. And like Terry said, the menu items will change. And I think the first time we tried to go through this full list, we kind of said show scheduled could change at any moment. So,
and what we really meant was it's going to change. We just can't say.
Yeah, I mean it's a Herculean effort for the folks that put on these shows to try to, because then you notice some midweek shows in there, and there was actually a question of Dax about, hey, why is Minnesota in the midweek when your other two shows are Friday, Saturday? And they're like, as these times compress, there's only, and as we have to move show dates around, there's only so many dates to go around. So you kind of have to take what you can get there.
And I think, Aaron, I think that's why we're seeing the cancellations we're seeing too, because as everything, just like last year, they tried to compress it to the back of the year. There just aren't any dates left. So
yeah, exactly.
But Aaron, you have a news item?
I do have a quick news item, just kind of a follow-up. Last week we had Scott Ritter from DAX on with us for a really fun educational program. We had a blast. Scott basically took over, and it was perfect. He made for a great show.
We just held on.
Yeah, exactly. It was awesome. And so anyhow, he gave the regulators a free gift at the end. This zip file full of forms, and I talked to some folks that got the forms. And because the forms were so old, they were actually, I think, Corel 5 or something along those lines, that most people could not open them in their newer versions of Corel. So I actually reached out to a good friend, Clay, from CorelTrainer.com. And he did confirm that after a certain amount of time, Corel doesn't, which seems odd to me, but that's what Corel chose to do, is that they don't go back that far. Like after 10 years, I guess you have to resave your files every 10 years in the newer format. I didn't really quite understand the logic behind it, but that's the case. So Scott actually converted those forms into PDF files and then re-uploaded them to that same location, which is daxshow.com/forms.zip. And so if you had a hard time opening them, go back and re-download that file again, and there should be PDF files that now you can open them up in Corel, Illustrator, Photoshop, wherever you might want to use them. And so just a really cool opportunity to get some things and make those things work for your shop. And so I thought that was a really cool free gift, and I wanted to make sure everybody could actually use them. So
I think that's Corel's policy of those people must all be dead by now. So we're no longer going to help out with that. Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So Jay Bassell checking in says, what's up, fellas? Another great day in paradise, aka Phoenix, Scottsdale, Glendale. Terry, what's it look like there?
It's going to be 82 here today. It's a beautiful sunny day.
All right. Well, Kim Johnson follows that up with, good morning, boys, from a cold, rainy day in Oklahoma. Kim, I know a place in Glendale you should probably go hang out.
Yeah, you should check this out.
It's really nice. Terry, you should send her a picture or something.
Yeah, she loves when I do that kind of thing.
Oh, I'm sure. I can just see it in her face too. That's yeah.
Hey, Kim, I was out by the pool this morning. Just saying.
All right. So anyhow, Jim said he could open some of the files in Corel X6, and Dean asked, is he still running XP?
He's running Vista.
Yeah. So Becky said, I'm still quite alive and found my X3 and X5 disc the other day. So, all right. Well, apparently we're not funny, Terry. So according to all right, I'll get way off track. What we're really here for is to talk to Jim and Ray. But the second thing we're here for is the dad jokes. So you've got a great one, Terry. I am ready. Let's do it.
I do have a dad joke for today. Here it is. What is a sea monster's favorite meal?
What is a sea monster's favorite meal, Terry?
It's fish and chips.
That's a good one. I like
maybe a little malt vinegar there on the chips.
A little fish. That's wonderful.
All right. Aaron, before we dive in, we want to thank everyone for checking out the Two Regular Guys podcast. We are always looking for new guests. If you or anyone you know would like to join us, go to calendly.com/2 regular guys with your show ideas. If you are listening to the podcast version of our show, we would appreciate you sharing the Two Regular Guys with your industry friends so they can become regulators too. We would love and appreciate you giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Podcast, or wherever you do your podcast listening. If you are watching us live right now, please join in with comments and questions. Reach out to industry friends so they can join us today too.
Sorry, I'm giggling at some of the comments as well. So Jeff mentioned that there's a different version of that joke, which would not make it a dad joke in that particular version. All right. So, Terry, we're going to jump right into talking to Ray and Jim here. And
Okay.
But I do want to make sure that to kind of back up what you said there, really would appreciate the reviews on the podcast platforms, Apple Podcast. Actually, just wrapping up, today is the last day of PodFest, and I actually got to be a speaker at PodFest this last week.
That's awesome.
Boy, I learned so much cool stuff about podcasting and all of the content creation stuff. It was really cool. So, and one of the things I learned is those reviews are really, really important. So if you like what we do here at Two Regular Guys, do us that favor. Even if you don't listen to the podcast version, please go look us up on your podcast player of choice and tell people what you think.
It's 2, the number 2.
To the number 2 Regular Guys Talking Decoration. If you want, if it doesn't come up right away, just say Two Regular Guys Talking Decoration. So Jay says, by the way, CorelDRAW version 5 was released in 1994 and was compatible with Windows 3.1.
Wow.
Yes, that's way back. And hello, David. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you being here. All right. So Craig says he's looking forward to today's guest. So let's do that, Terry. So first, I want to introduce Ray Weiss, who's the Director of Digital Print and Programming for Printing United Alliance. And he joined the association in 2014. He oversees training and certification workshops at Printing United Alliance. Ray is project manager for both the PDAA certification program and the Printing United Alliance Digital Color Professionals certification program. That's a mouthful. I love it. And is also an instructor for the Color Management Booth Camp. So welcome into the show, Ray.
All right. And Jim Raffel is a color management consultant who also serves as CEO of ColorCasters LLC and ColorMetrix Technologies LLC. As a veteran of the printing industry and a graduate of Rochester Institute of Technology's acclaimed printing management program, in 1995, he formed ColorMetrix to bring an idea he had to make color measurement and evaluation easier by creating easy-to-use software solutions. We like that. Jim also co-hosts the weekly Die Subcast with new episodes released each Friday. Learn more at diesubcast.com. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, how are you doing?
Welcome.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being here, guys. And so let's start off like this, and we're going to do our best here to kind of punt this back and forth, but you guys are the stars of the show, so jump in where you guys see fit. But Ray, why don't I start off with you here? Maybe just share why color management is so important for decorators. Why not just throw that thing on your printer of choice and push print and hope for the best?
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, sounds like fun, right?
And by the way, 90% of our listeners right now, that's what they're doing. So.
Right. I mean, in so much of the industry, it's this. I've got my fingers crossed. I'm sending that job, and I'm hoping the color comes out right. And that's not just decorators, right? That's really across all industry, all of our communities, I guess is the best way to put it. Sure. And so why do I want that to be my strategy, right? There's ways that you can go about getting consistent, predictable, repeatable color. Why wouldn't I do it, right? I mean, so that's my answer, right? Is that I don't want to live that world. And I would say this, if I'm printing 1 or 2 shirts, the onesie twosie jobs, okay, maybe you could make an argument it's not that critical. But what happens when you have to reprint that job? Somebody, ordered a shirt from you 6 months ago and they want another shirt, or somebody comes in and wants 25 shirts. I want to make sure that I've got consistency across that job, because otherwise I run the risk of rejection of the job, rejection of parts of the job. And so that's just a cost that if I could avoid it, I want to avoid it.
That makes sense. Well, so Jim, you've made a career out of color management with ColorMetrix and ColorCasters. Where are you seeing people struggling the most with color?
That's a great question. So the early part of my career was actually focused way more on color measurement, color verification, and color process control. And that actually leads to the answer to the more specific answer to your question. Color management is great, and it's when properly done is mostly a behind the scenes activity, is what I'm starting to kind of figure out in the last year or so, believe it or not. Ray gave a great example of, I printed 25 shirts, right? What if he printed 25 shirts and they were this orange, right? And what if a week from now, the customer came back and said, we actually need 27 shirts. Can you print 2 more for me? Well, why didn't they need 2 more shirts? And I was holding up an orange face gator for those of you listening later. Because we're trying to match this pelican orange case that's going to be the feature of our trade show display. And so when Ray sends him 2 more shirts that are nowhere near this orange, like these are, they're going to say, no, those 2 don't work. And by the way, one of those was for the president of the company. Right. I mean, it sounds crazy.
Always.
Yeah, but this is the way it actually breaks down. And that's when we get the phone call, right? And so while they bring us in most commonly to do things like that, which I call spot color measurement, spot color matching, essentially, right? Yeah. So it's a name spot color. It could be a Pantone. It could be a brand color. Sometimes you got to measure it. Sometimes you just got a swatch and you got to match it. Spot color matching. Thanks. That's the word I was looking for. And so that ends up being where the most struggles are, is that we're trying to match a color. Someone mentioned a John Deere tractor earlier. Mm-hmm. I literally just did that this week. We were on site with a customer. We're all done. They said, hey, we want to see if this all really works. We're going to try it ourselves. And so we got there in the morning of the 3rd day, and they've got this piece of a John Deere tractor, and they're measuring it with a spectrophotometer, and they're printing out their color swatches. And after what we call 2 iterations, they printed out the vinyl, and they applied it to the John Deere tractor. And it was, in their words, not mine, their words, it was a perfect match. I hate that phrase. There's no such thing as a perfect match, but it was certainly acceptable. So,
well, yeah, once people start getting to perfect, then our purpose is gone, right? There's always room for improvement.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think, Jim, on that whole idea there, a lot can be said about the fact that you're not going to get to perfect because there are so many potential variables, right? If you're applying that outside in natural sunlight versus applying that in, so what the light is reflecting on it is going to affect all that stuff too, right?
So, right, that's the appearance side of color, right? So there's color and then there's appearance. And appearance is driven in large part by, as you mentioned, the illumination or the light source, right? Is it daylight outside? Is it incandescent in your home? Is it some form of store lighting at a Walmart or a Target or wherever you might be? And that does have a very big impact. And the other piece of that is, even though these aren't dye sub examples, this week we were working with two kinds of printers. One was a solvent-based printer printing primarily on films to be applied to cars and walls and things like that. Those are generally a very glossy surface, not all of them, but generally very glossy. And then we were also on, and we also did some wall coverings that were very matte on that series of printers. And then we had a flatbed UV printer where they print both first surface on the top and second surface on the bottom of primarily like acrylic. And so, you want to talk about a difference in appearance, try printing first surface on acrylic and then put the same image second surface on a 1/4 inch of acrylic. It does not look the same.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, there are ways that then we can adjust for that kind of thing, right?
There are. And, that was one of my props earlier. So,
okay.
Well,
let's. I'm probably jumping ahead. Then I get so excited listening to smart people.
No.
So can we back up for a moment, or do you want to go ahead and do that, Ray?
Well, I just think I think that this kind of dovetails into what we're talking about, right? And it's important. So this is just from my Pantone book, and if your Pantone book doesn't have this, throw it out and buy a new one, because that means it's more than 10 years old, right? Because all of the ones for the last 10 years have these are two different colors, and when you view them under D50, which is typical outdoor lighting, they will appear the same. So if I'm doing work, I'm preparing prints for my customer that I know they're going to use at their family reunion outside, I'm going to make sure that we proof it somewhere where these two colors are the same. I'm going to check it, and I'm going to ask my customer to check it under this lighting, because that's where they're going to use it. And that's where that's a big error that people make. They're working in their house, they're working in their garage, they're working in their shop, and all those places could have, who knows what the lighting condition is. Yeah. So I want to make sure that I've got something that's consistent, that I can, and that my customer and I can agree on. Yeah. And I choose D50 because it's typical outdoors, right? So, in the decorator community, I suspect there's a lot of that being used outdoors. I get a lot of that from the installer community. They're doing vehicle graphics that they're applying, and sometimes people will proof them in their bay, and then as soon as the car backs out, the customer goes, "Whoa, that's not the color you showed me."
That's not royal. That's purple.
Right.
And by the way, when Ray says throw out that Pantone book, he's talking to you Corel 3 users we were talking about earlier.
Throw out that Pantone book.
Yeah. Right. So Goose, to actually follow up on that, asks, so what's the best before date on a Pantone book?
So
go ahead.
It's not really a before date. It's I don't think they put dates on them. Basically, when you've owned it for 12 to maybe 18 months on the outside, it's time to throw it away. There's just too much that happens to a Pantone book over time. Every time you fan it, you're rubbing the pages together, which does impact the color, plus the oils on your fingers touching them, and then you add that in, and so the colors change. Okay. The other really good reason to buy a new Pantone book about every 12 to 18 months is on the back is a code. It's a numeric code, and that's a license code for, I can't remember the exact name. It's an application you can run on your Mac or your PC, which is essentially access to the Pantone digital library. And if you have a instrument called the spectrophotometer that you can plug in, you can literally take measurements and it will show you the closest match on screen digitally, instead of using the book, which is really a guide. The book is just a guide or a map to the digital references. The digital references are the actual Pantone colors.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. That's some great information there already, guys. So we've got some great questions coming in from the regulators too, but I do want to go back here. So kind of start from the beginning. And at this point, guys, I'm going to let you guys kind of bat these back and forth a little bit, if that's okay. But maybe Ray, you could start us off on this. How much color management control kind of stems from art preparation?
It's huge, right? And in fact, so again, I'm not here to besmirch Corel users. I'll besmirch the Adobe users for a minute.
Okay.
I suspect that if most Adobe users were to be honest and go right now and look at their color settings, they probably are default because nobody ever goes in and checks those or changes them. And so they're using sRGB as their RGB space and US web coded swap as their CMYK space. Both terribly out of date, small color spaces. And in both of those cases, most printers can print more than those two color spaces. So right there, you hamstring your color because you say, I only want to use SR. So I design an RGB and then I print to my printer. And I'm using sRGB. Well, I call it killing color. You just killed a bunch of color. And once you kill it, it doesn't come back. So if it were me, I'd go into my color settings and change it to Adobe RGB 1998. And I'd pick one of the Grackle. So Grackle 2006 or Grackle 2013. That's going to be a larger subset of colors. I would recommend designing in RGB, but if you're going to design in CMYK, at least have a color space that is large enough to capture more of those colors.
Yeah.
But right there, if you don't have those settings right, you hamstring your color.
Okay.
I don't care how good a printer you have.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go change mine real quick. But while you're doing that, Jim, can you add anything there?
So yeah, Ray mentioned where those settings are in any Adobe app is under Edit and Color Settings.
Yeah.
And you can actually then create a file that you can export and share both with people within your organization and outside your organization, so that they can load that file and have the identical color settings that you have. And it's very nuanced. There's several on that page. There are other things that we don't have time to dive into in this podcast, but you can make sure that they're the correct settings for your workflow, and then you can share them with your customer, and that becomes one of their presets in the drop-down list if they load it right. And so anytime they're working files for you, they can be working them in the correct format. So it has a big impact. I mean, this is something that, I hate to keep going back to this week, but it was a great example. I was on site for 3 days with my business partner, Shelby, and Shelby, her background is design and graphics. And so she spent the better part of a morning with the 3 designers or 4 designers in the group, explaining all this to them. They actually went as far as to figure out, because they're a big enough organization, they have Adobe Bridge and they actually use it. So they actually created one set of color settings, installed it in Bridge, and enforce it now as a policy. So you pretty much can't use the Adobe apps in their building without the right settings. And that's going to be huge for them, because they were on the sRGB and swap that Ray was mentioning. And so they're going to gain conservatively 15 to 20% more colors in their gamut right off the bat, just by that change. And then the more important thing is that swap profile is not gray balanced. That profile is so old that it was built before we used methodologies like G7 to create a gray balanced color gamut. Even the Grackle 2006, which is now getting to be an old profile, but it was one of the very first ones released using the G7 gray balanced methodology. So it means that by making those changes, you're getting a bigger gamut, and B, more accurate color reproduction, no matter what the output profile on the printer is, which we haven't even talked about yet.
Right.
Well, Ray mentioned he didn't want to be Spurch Corel users. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how all this is impacted by your chosen art program, because as we all know, a lot of folks use DTG and Sublimation. Decorators use Photoshop, but if they came from the world of screen printing, and a lot of our listeners are screen printers, they're probably Corel Draw users. So how are art programs impacting what we're talking about here? Jim, let's start with you.
Wow.
But don't besmirch anybody.
No, and I really won't, because if that side of our business is really Shelby, but if she were here, what she would say is that it doesn't really matter what design program you use, because the more recent versions of Corel have these same color settings in them. Right. If people are using Flexi from SAI, these same settings exist in that software.
Right.
So any decent piece of modern design software that you should be using in a sign shop or a screen print shop or a die sub shop, all of them have access to settings like these. So it's less a matter of which application you choose, and more a matter of configuring it correctly, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would say, because Terry, we always get asked this question, and I know Jim will smile as soon as I say it, but the question is, what's the best rip? And you're like, okay, hold on, slow down. What rip are you using? And by the way, the best rip really is the knowledge that you have up here and understanding how to get the best and the most out of your rip. Are there some rips that have more features than others? Absolutely. You pay for what you get, and you get what you pay for. So yes, you can pay a more premium dollar amount for a particular rip, but if you don't know how to use it, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You might get maybe some better color, but what you really need to know is how to use it. And that's, to Jim's point, it doesn't matter Corel, Flexi, Adobe. I need to know, how do I get my color settings set up for the most success on the output end?
Well, that's an excellent answer. Knowing how to use it, because I'm sure we all have lots of programs and rips and software that has lots of potential, but if we don't learn how to use it, it's like when I was in Cold Stone Creamery yesterday and said, "What's the best flavor?" That's what. And obviously, it was butter pecan, but.
Oh, that's funny. All right, guys. So I'm going to get to some of our regulators' questions, some of our listeners' questions here. So we're going to bounce around just a hair here. So bear with us, but we've got some fantastic questions here. So real quick one for you, Jim, from Brian Lang. He says, is it true you should store your Pantone book in a light-safe area or container?
Absolutely. I mean, any color standard, whether it be a Pantone book or a physical standard provided by a customer, it should be stored someplace that is cool, dry, and dark.
Excellent. Okay, great.
And by the way, for our listeners who don't know about where or how to get a Pantone book, almost all of your suppliers carry the Pantone book, so it's readily available.
Yeah, Jim, is that something that you guys offer through your company as well?
We don't.
No.
Right. I just wasn't sure who if we got somebody here, we might as well.
That's why I said almost.
Well,
us neither.
Jim's not a supplier of those things. He's the supplier of the knowledge of the.
There's no Aaron. There's no perfect supplier.
Okay, I'll leave that be, and we'll move on here. All right, so Pantone Dan Campbell has got a couple of questions for us here, and I will let you guys choose who wants to tackle this first. But he says, can they provide some paths to synchronizing monitor calibration, digital programs such as Photoshop, paper-proof printer calibration, and DTG color output, all working together using the same color calibration output? ? So if you guys can pull a question out of that, please.
So I'll start, and then I'll let Jim kind of jump in. But so I would say I would start by profiling or calibrating my monitor, because by doing that, you can then use the proof setup and proof settings in. Again, I'm more familiar with Adobe products, so I'll talk about that for primarily, but you can set up a proof setup there to see how it's going to reproduce. But I have to have profiled my monitor first. And then, as far as there's some, and Jim, one of the latest ones that I've been kind of batting back and forth is, when I start talking about, these RGB and CMYK spaces, and some people will say, well, could I target in Illustrator, for instance, use the CMY space, my printer's output? And I did some research on that, and you can, but to Jim's earlier point, and then I'll shut up and let Jim talk for a minute. But the challenge there is, if your printer's output is not gray balanced, you will just give yourself all kinds of trouble right off the bat. And that was his point about using something like Grackle, which is gray balanced. Yeah. So really, I would start by profiling my monitor, have my settings correct in my design software so that I could proof it. And then, Jim, I'll let you talk about calibrating printers.
Okay. So, and it's interesting that our question involved direct to garment, because that's something that I have some of my first and newest experience in just this year. I've actually spent, I think, 5 or 6 days this year doing direct to garment on some of the brand new Epson printers. And so Ray pointed out that, yes, you can use your output profile, your printer's profile, as your rendering, or really your rendering profile in the proof setup. But if it's not a gray balanced profile, why bother? So the first step we did in the direct to garment situation was we built gray balanced profiles, and we verified those using, actually, I sent Ray images of the Printing United Alliance test print on t-shirts, on 3 or 4 different t-shirts. But we use it for a reason, because there's a control strip on there, the Idea Alliance 12647-7. That's a 3-roll bar that you can measure with a spectrophotometer, and it will tell you if you are gray balanced, and it will tell you the size of your gamut approximately, things that matter. And so we can verify that we've built good profiles on these 3 different t-shirt materials. because you do need a different profile for each t-shirt material if you want good color and gray balance. And this is another perfect example. I was brought in for spot colors. And I said, I can't help you with spot colors until we build new profiles. Well, why? Well, because you need profiles that are gray balanced so that we can fix your whole workflow. And so we started there, and we figured out in the direct-to-garment space, there's a whole bunch of variables that I prefer not to master, but I know just enough about to be dangerous. There is the pretreatment. You can pretreat this amount one time, or you can pretreat this amount one time and then put a little layer on top of that. And it depends on the 3 different shirts. They did that 3 different ways. They wouldn't tell me the exact settings because they consider that proprietary, and I know why now. It makes a huge difference in the way that white ink then lays down. And of course, that white ink laydown is incredibly important for making a profile, because that now becomes the white point on whatever shirt we're going to use. And the white point is just an unbelievably important piece of the color management puzzle. And so we had to get that right. And then we print all the characterization charts, which is all the little squares, and we measure those, and we build a profile. Now we can take that profile after we verified it, and we can plug that in to Adobe or wherever, I don't care, any design program, and use that as our destination, or our source, really, our source CMYK profile. And we'll get a very good idea on screen, if it's calibrated and it's a good monitor, we'll get a good idea on screen what we're going to get on our shirt. And I hope that answers this question. It was a pretty deep question with a lot of thought.
It had a lot of parts to it.
Yeah, it did.
I think we hit most of them.
Yeah, I think you did too. I mean, I can't wait. I'm actually excited to go back and watch this myself and listen to it myself, because I can't write it all down while you guys are talking here.
It's like in Washington, D.C. I have a 3-part question.
Let me write it down.
The first deals with the economy. The second deals with immigration. The third deals with...
All right. So let's see here. Jeff has a question for us. He says, how do we understand the, quote, opaqueness of ink or thread, and how it impacts color that customers will see? We get a lot of PMS requests with art, but we know they don't match after application. I think, Jim, you just spoke to that a little bit with your white underbase idea, but maybe you guys can expand on that a little bit.
You want to start, Ray, or you want me to?
Well, I mean, so inks are transparent, right? So whatever is the surface does become your white point, whether it's the shirt or whether it's the white ink, that becomes your white point. But you can do a lot of the spot color matching work. And I'm excited. I'll tell you, one of the new, I don't know how new, but I know it's relatively newer. When direct to garment printing first came out, you basically took a PNG and you sent it through a print driver and you printed it, and you got whatever color you could get, and that was what you got.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing more and more RIP software that's connecting to DTG machines, which means you can build profiles, which means you can do spot color matching. Now, what you have to remember is you can't shortcut it. So you can't go, well, I'm trying to do spot color matching on this black shirt that I'm going to print my white ink, but man, it's expensive and tough to print white ink. So I'm going to do it on a white shirt. And then I'll just print it on the black shirt with white ink, and it'll be the same, right? No, it won't. And it's like when I talk to our installer community, and they print on vinyl and then laminate, right? And they have to wait a little bit, and then they laminate. And so when they do profiling, they want to print on the vinyl and measure it and then move on. And I'm like, you can't. You have to laminate, then measure. And so if I'm going to do good spot color matching, and to the point of the question, I don't remember their name, but to their point, I need to do my spot color work in a production setting, and I could probably dial those in a lot closer than you think. Certainly, I could get good results. You're never going to match the color, but if you understand color management and how people see color and how they're going to see the shift of color hue from like orange to red or blue to violet, they'll see that before they will see a shift in chroma or saturation. So it might not be as red as the customer likes, but if it's on the same hue angle, there's a good chance they'll say, yeah, that's a close enough match. We're good. So you need to understand the process. Anyway, sorry. Go, Jim.
Well, no, so I want to pick up there, because one of the things Ray started talking about made me realize that we are a year into the pandemic, and we're starting. You guys at the beginning of the show, we're starting to list shows that are going to occur live, and hopefully, maybe some of the early ones on that list will get rescheduled or canceled. But I think by the time you get to the end of that list, we're gonna be back in person. And why do I bring that up when we're talking about color? Well, one of the biggest growth areas in dye sublimation just a year ago. I mean, it's hard to believe it was only a year ago. Was soft signage and the use of fabric to create trade show booths for a whole bunch of really good reasons: logistics, cost, shipping, all of that stuff, right? And talk about kind of a challenging environment to match a brand color, right? You've got a piece of fabric that when you build your profile, you're measuring it on a really nice uniform white surface, right? And so it's essentially backed. And when you actually build the booth, there's probably nothing behind it. It's probably, there's a piece of fabric on both sides of the frame, and there's air in between, and how much light gets in there and comes through is going to impact that color, right? And so those are challenges, but they're challenges that can be overcome. And so what Ray is saying is you need to try and simulate that in your shop. And most big most big dye sublimation printers who are doing trade show displays or architectural displays, whatever you want to call it, there's just this huge move to soft-sided displays. And so you need to, in your shop, set up an area. Your setup area should have lighting that simulates the trade show floor or lobby that it's going to be displayed in, if that color is that critical. I've worked with customers who do dye sublimation carpet and for people like large banks in New York City, right? So you walk in the lobby and there's a big old piece of carpet down there and it's got the logo of the bank on it. Well, that matters, right? And so they simulated the lighting from that lobby in their shop before they delivered the carpet.
Right. Wow, that's great. Good. All right, Terry. Well, where do you want to head next here?
Along those lines, our friend, thanks for covering for my turned off mic.
Oh, I forgot to overdub. Sorry.
You should have overdubbed me in Spanish. That's what we do. But along those exact same lines, our friend Gusta in Sweden asked, what is the best light inside to get the best color? And I think what he's saying is, for general purposes, what's the best thing that we can do in our day-to-day DTG or sublimation shops to be able to get as true a color as possible without going to great expense?
You want me to touch on that, Jim? I mean,
yep,
to me, I would say I'm a big fan of standards, right? Standards have, they're tried, true, and tested. And so if it were me, I would try to get D50 lighting or as close to it as I could get, because that's the graphic standard. And so many of these things are based on that, viewing conditions and, a lot of profiles, that's sort of a default, either D50 or D65. So if it were me, I'd probably shoot for D50 or as close as possible. I actually got pretty close in our lab in Fairfax by putting in the D50 light bulbs. The light that I measured was pretty close to D50.
Wow. And that's what I've had some customers who are willing to make the investment. They've painted the walls in their main viewing area Munsell gray, and they've installed the D50 lighting from one of the major lighting manufacturers or controlled lighting manufacturers in our industry. They've installed those bulbs in their overhead ballasts, and it's it can be very helpful. But D50 is a good place to start. And everyone's like, well, that's not what we have where the work is used. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But when I'm building profiles, I'm trying to reduce variables because I'm trying to build a consistent, repeatable, predictable profile. That means one of the variables is the light, right? So I need to have consistent, predictable, and repeatable light. In other words, where I'm sitting right now would be horrible. There's a window over there, right? And so there's a window over there. There's an LED light there. There's an incandescent bulb up there. It's my home office is a mess, right? But in my basement lab, there is a D50 light booth. Small one, but I have a D50 light booth.
You know, it's funny you say that because I did, in fact, get a text about 20 minutes ago saying, "Hey, you forgot to close the curtains in your office." As you can see.
I do see that.
Yeah. So, all right. So I know you guys have already touched on this a little bit, and maybe Jim, you can start us off by kind of seeing if we can go just a hair deeper here. But when we're talking about DTG sublimation, so these are digital printing technologies. You go into vinyl printing and those types of things. What are the biggest challenges? I know we talked about variables and things like that, but what are some of the biggest challenges they face, and how can we overcome those?
So you're saying regardless of print process?
Yeah, I mean, specifically the DTG and sublimation is, I think, what a lot of our listeners are going to be most interested in. But we definitely have some sign printers. So that digital CMYK printing process.
All right. Now I can definitely focus on. I'm going to focus on sublimation then for a little while, because that's through the pandemic. What used to be my basement lab turned into my basement production facility, and we actually we began producing face and neck gaiters like this guy. Goes over your neck, pulls up over your face, face masks, and then we got into socks and all kinds of crazy stuff because we couldn't travel and we couldn't consult and we had to do something. Yeah. And so I went from being a guy who had some stuff in the corner of my basement to do client projects, building profiles, to producing. And so I got to feel a lot of the pain that my customers feel, where you have you all of a sudden get an order for 1,000 gaiters, and all you have is a 24-inch wide printer and one heat press, right? And you don't have the color you want, so you have to build a profile, and that's going to take 3 or 4 hours away from production time. And so I get all of this now, right? I understand. I always observed it. It's one thing to observe it; it's another thing to experience it. It's a lot easier to share experience. So, so the real challenge, honestly, and I've had a text conversation going on 2 weeks with one of my, used to be one of my boot camp students, and is now she has a really good job in color management. And her constant frustration is getting time on the machine to build profiles. And I get it, because that piece of equipment is typically very capital intensive. And as a result, you want it producing, paying work, not samples that there's no immediate and direct value in. Yeah. And so, that to me is probably, thing one is, after you hire a color management consultant or make your own decision to do it internally, block the time. Don't block an hour, don't block 2 hours, block a day. Somehow or another, figure out a way to block a day on that machine. Why? Because you're going to have problems. You're going to start first thing in the morning, and you're going to do a nozzle check, and you're going to be missing 20% of your nozzles on a Monday morning, maybe, right? And it's going to take you an hour or two of cleans and maintenance to get all your nozzles back. All right, so now you're finally starting around 9 or 10 o'clock. Then you realize that the humidifier hasn't kicked in, and you're at 35% humidity, and that's not where you want to make your profile. So now you got to wait another hour or two while the humidity gets up to 45%, so that it's real production environment. These sound like crazy things. I've experienced them firsthand, right? Yeah. And now you're trying to install your RIP upgrade, and guess what? Your IT guy has your machine locked down, so you got to track him down. I mean, and I've had all of these happen in the same day. And so people are, why do I need to block 2 days? I can tell you why. And I haven't even talked about color management yet, have I?
Yeah, we haven't got there yet, but yeah.
No. And that's the important part, is to understand that color management is a piece of the entire production puzzle, right? And it's a piece that, when well done, is transparent, but that when you want to tweak it and tune it and set it up, I need complete control of your production facility during the period of time I'm doing that. And if I don't have that control, then it's just going to take longer, and you're not going to get as good of results. I mean, and I'm not sure if that fully answered your question, but to me, that becomes the real nature of the problem, is not understanding that I don't just come in and click my mouse 3 times and change 4 drop downs, and your color is magically better. That's just not how it works.
Well, and I also was thinking, is that having the right tools, yeah. Right? And so, before the show, I was showing off some of the tools that I had here, and I need to have a device, whether it's this one or, maybe in textile, I'm going to have a SpectroPad, a Barbieri, or maybe I'll have this i1, but I'll have a Pro 3 Plus, so a larger aperture, and I'll have, something to monitor the humidity and the temperature to be able to do a trend report on this. This is a sensor push. They're $50 on Amazon, but they're pretty accurate, and they give me good trend analysis, so I can see it's like Jim said. If I know that at 7 a.m, my humidity is at 35%, I'm not going to schedule profiling then. I'm going to know I'm going to have to wait until 9 or 10. But I wouldn't know that unless I had a device that could kind of give me that trend and show me. Or I might have to fix that problem. If I said I've got to do it at 7, then I better fix it. But sometimes people look at this device and they say, yeah, but that's just costing me money. And I'm telling you, yes, you're right. When you first pay for this and bring it into your shop, it's an expense, but it will quickly pay for itself because you could have consistent color. You could build your own profiles. Usually building your own profile means you're saving ink. I don't know about everybody else, but ink costs money. And if I could save, by building my profile correctly, save ink, this thing will pay for itself in no time. I do a verification swatch. To Jim's point about setting aside the time, I was at a big shop where, just like he said, every minute, literally minute, is booked on the press. Now, this was a big graphics producer, but still, every minute is booked. So what they did was they scheduled every day 30 minutes to do maintenance and to do a quick verification strip to see that everything's printing right. And if it is, great, just go. Once you set the process up, then you need to verify that it's working, and then you just print. That's the beauty of it. Yeah. And if there is a problem, you know how to fix it. You fix it and you move on.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Terry, do you have something to add?
Well, yeah, and that's so true on so many levels in production shops, because it's so easy to say we can squeeze in one more job rather than doing the things that we really need to do for the long term in our businesses. So it's not just color matching, it's training, it's all kinds of things like that we need to fit into the schedule. We have a good friend of the show, Shandy Lindley. He's down in Texas, and his question is, where can we find the instructions for all these great suggestions? In other words, what are some resources for us to know how to use these things?
This is perfect.
Who wants to talk first? You guys are fighting over the microphone.
I'll plug Ray. So one of the things that happened, the way I know Ray is I was speaking at a conference or a trade show on a trade show floor, not his, but someone else's, and he was attending because he had just joined then SJ, now Printing United, and he cornered my business partner Shelby and asked me to come and participate in this thing called Color Management Boot Camp, which at the time was not a certification program. It was really just 2.5 days of a lot of fun. I'm not kidding. It was the wild, wild west of color. And a year and a half into that, Ray's board of directors asked that they pursue, or at least examine, turning it into a certification program as well. And just, a little bit better structure to the program. And so we turned this 2.5 day boot camp into a certification program. We standardized, the slide decks, made sure that things were a little more consistent, made sure that SGI had rights, or Printing United had rights to all of the content, even if it was non-exclusive. And so I think it's an unbelievably good place to get base level color management knowledge. And what do I mean by that? I have this same person, her name's Mary. She attended a boot camp that Ray was actually at in Salt Lake City several years ago, and leveraged that leveraged it into a job with color management in the title, and moved halfway across the country to make a lot more money. So that right there speaks, volumes to the program. Sure. Yeah. And then she recently went and got another certification, which I'm not going to bash anyone, but it's a good certification. It's one I have. But she said, it's okay, but I didn't really learn the same depth and breadth of knowledge that you guys gave us in 2.5 days. It really is. I mean, it's just a ton of knowledge in 2.5 days. And, now during the pandemic, I'll let Ray speak to this part, but it's very reasonably priced, and it's offered multiple times a month throughout the year. So
it's great.
Well, yeah, I'll be Reader's Digest because he did a good one, but it's just, yes, the program's here. But I also would say, if you just need a quick question, I'm always available. It's what I love about my job. That's the other part of my job, is that I'm there to answer questions from our members. Now, I'll even answer a question from a non-member, but if you start asking me 2 or 3 questions, I'm going to say, why aren't you joining the association? Give me a break. But, that's what we're there for. The association is there to answer these types of questions. And when it gets a little deeper and it makes sense, then we have a formal program that you can follow through.
Well, you still have your tech tips too, right? Tuesday tech tips.
We do. We do Tech Tip Tuesdays pretty reliably.
Blog posts. There's all kinds of resources for free. You're right. I skipped all those.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So Jim, tell us a little bit about the services that you guys provide.
So ColorCasters, and I'm going to talk mostly about ColorCasters because ColorMetrix has become more of a middleware software company. But ColorCasters does color management, consulting, and training. The main focus is, it's really not, it's both. It's been challenging in the pandemic to do the training part because we have to do it all online, and it financially is tricky. But we've got the boot camps that you can sign up for online. We've got one coming up in just a few weeks. It's relatively reasonably priced. It's a couple 2.5 days. I think we've got it down to, and you can learn all about color management, or you can hire Shelby and I, and we will come in and, it's really, we'll either do the work or we'll do the work and show you how to use the fishing pole too.
Right.
So that's up to you. If you want to learn how to fish, we can do that at the same time. And then we also, just out of necessity, we now carry a line of color management related tools. So we can sell you spectrophotometers, RIP upgrades, some great verification software called Spot On for doing the color verification and the color process control. And we really did that out of necessity because your traditional graphic arts dealers, they don't seem to love those product lines because there's no recurring revenue in them. So for us, the recurring revenue is the consulting. So we view those tools as the razor and we're the blade. So.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. All right, cool. So Ray, I'm going to go back to you real quick here. So tell people where they can find you then. Just share a little bit about Printing United Alliance.
Yes, sir. So even though it's Printing United Alliance, because of the merger, we have not settled. Well, I know we've settled on a web domain, but we're still doing 2 websites. So, but you go to sgia.org right now, and then under education workshops, you'll see a lot of information there. You can reach me at rweiss, WEISS, at printing.org. Always up for questions and help. There's so many things on Printing United Alliance, Aaron. I mean, you've got our Ask the Expert webinar series for members. You've got our subject matter experts. So if you have a question about HR or safety or sustainability, or in my arena, digital print and color management, we have a lot of resources there at the association level.
Perfect. That's fantastic. So you guys make sure you go check it out. Eric's got us in the comments there. The website for Printing United Alliance is currently sgia.org. So good place to start. Jim, talk to us about your podcast here. We're excited you would think that, we've got a podcast and we want to just hold on to the space, but that's not how we act over here. We love when people are putting effort into sharing knowledge and podcasting. So tell us all about diesubcast.com.
Sure. So about a year ago, Shelby and I sat down and said, what are we going to do? And one of our brilliant ideas was a podcast. And we bought microphones, and we had my son, Jacob, who works for us, do some research. And then we got busy making gators, and it got totally sidelined. Sure. And then Crazy Jim got involved in Bitcoin this fall. I know, what does this have to do with the story? I started listening to a podcast, and this guy does he does a daily podcast, and I started listening to it every single day. And I'm going, we can do this. This isn't that hard. And I thought to myself, we've already done the research. So we dusted off the idea in December. I came up with a show script, not unlike you guys have, believe it or not. And we started inviting guests. And I think our first guest is with us right now. It was you, wasn't it?
I was the second.
No, you were the first. We did the first episode was the 2 of us together, I think. Anyway,
okay, got
Ray
it.
came on early. And we basically just, it's Shelby and I asking our guests to tell us their story and talk about dye sublimation and, the challenges they have. And what they view the best practices as. And we have people like Chris Bernay from Vapor Apparel come on and talk about textile and the whole garment industry. And we've had people come on from whattheythink.com and talk about, what they see as industry trends and how hard it is to do content marketing, which is what we're all doing right now, right? We're all sitting here doing content marketing and people think it's the easiest thing in the world. And this part is easy, right? This is the easy part. This is the fun part. If I could get paid to talk, I'd be a rich man. But the reality is we then have to figure out how to get audience, right? And that was my huge takeaway from our talk with Eric Vessels. And that is that audience is currency, right? I mean, audience is absolutely currency in 2021. And so that's why we started the podcast, because we felt like we needed to add more value to our audience to provide more. And it's something that it's easy for me to time shift it. We can record it whenever. And Jacob makes sure that that we're posted every Friday morning. And if you'll let me, this morning's episode is really special to me. We interviewed a gentleman who I met on Twitter, Michael Josephich, who unfortunately passed away about 3 days after we did our podcast with him. He was in the industry forever and ever. He was 73 years old and retired. So we had to hold that episode for about a month and a half, and we just released it this morning. And it's a really special one to us. It means a lot. So if you guys want to go listen, today's episode is probably one of the best ones.
Excellent. Yes, we will definitely get over there and check that out. Excellent. Terry, anything else that we missed?
I don't think so. I think we know how to get a hold of you guys. This has been fabulous. This has been awesome. I learned a lot today. And
Thank you.
Aaron and I always talk about after shows where we learn a lot. We've got to have those guys back.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we've got lots of comments that we didn't even have a chance to get to. Lots of great questions. So if you guys get a chance to go over to our Facebook page, certainly feel free to hit any of those questions up. But that also gives us a great excuse to beg you guys back one of these days soon.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Excellent. All right,
Wow.
Terry. Well, that was fantastic. Lots of great information, tons of fantastic content. And like I said, we didn't even have a chance to get to all the questions, but that's always next time, right?
Exactly right. But that was an excellent show. I loved it.
All right. All right, Terry. Well, let's actually, I know it's not on there because I haven't had a chance to write it out yet, but I'm going to do 5 things here. I'm going to do it off the top.
They're going to be off the top of your head. Okay.
Yeah, it should be okay. I think I'll be okay. So, Eric, let's introduce 5 things here real quick. All right. Well, so 5 things, 5 ways to combat virtual fatigue. And I'm going to just preface this with saying on both sides of the aisle, right? So everybody's tired of listening and watching on virtually, but sometimes on the content creation side, we get a little tired of also creating. And so this is actually from my recent Podfest Global talk that I did this last Wednesday. So that's how I can do it off the top of my head here. All right. So the number one thing we can do to combat virtual fatigue is to focus on the relationships. Make sure that it's not about the content and that it's more about the relationships. The second thing that we can do is we can focus on our why. Why is it that you're bringing the content? Why is it that you're looking to provide value? What does it do for the greater good, right? So that's number 2. Number 3, talk to one person. Meaning when we're sitting here discussing and talking to the camera, right? We're hoping that it goes out to a wide audience. That's the hope, is that we can touch as many people as possible in a positive way. But if you're worried about being everything to everybody, you're going to end up being nothing to nobody. So that was number 3, right, Terry?
Yes.
If you're keeping score at home. Okay. Number 4, and this is what I love about our decorators community and the fact that we actually have an opportunity to participate in this, but realize that even when you're doing virtual content, there are fantastic creative ways to have physical contact, put a coffee mug in somebody's hand on the other side of that camera, and now I've got a physical connection to, so if I happen to have it here, I'll pull up a Two Regular Guys coffee mug that I use here. So now when I'm drinking my coffee out of the Two Regular Guys, I think, I really enjoy those Two Regular Guys. They're kind of fun. So, all right. And, and then number 5, be unique. And yes, we're all unique in our own special way, but be unique in your space, right? So Terry, you and I started this as a blog talk radio cast over our cell phones back in 2013. We were unique because at that time, you and I barely knew what a podcast was. In fact, I remember when I asked you, hey, let's do this podcast thing, you said to me, oh, that sounds great. And then you said, oh, but what's a podcast? Right?
Well, whatever it is, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. And so you were smart enough and brave enough to say, you know what, let's do it. Let's be unique. So those are my 5 ways to combat virtual fatigue.
Fantastic. I love it.
Awesome. All right, Terry. Well, what events do you have coming up here?
All right. March 25th, I'm going to be presenting my DAX online seminar. What equipment and supplies do I really need to buy when I'm starting my screen printing business? So get over to DAX Show, singular, no S at the end, daxshow.com to get signed up for that. And lots of other seminars Aaron's going to be doing, Eric will be doing, and lots of other great speakers. My complete screen printing business course in person, live, and in front of human beings at Workhorse Products in Phoenix. What's that?
6 feet apart. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be at Workhorse Products in Phoenix, April 17th and 18th. I will be doing the same class at Atlas Screen Supply in Chicago, Schiller Park, May 22nd and 23rd. Heads up, those classes, people are hungry for in-person. Those classes are filling up fast. So if you're interested, go to terrycombs.com and get signed up for those classes while we still have space. Yeah. Aaron, how about you?
Oh, that's fantastic, Terry. I'm excited that you guys will get back to that and doing it safe and doing it the right way. But
absolutely,
get back with people again will be fantastic. I think people need Terry's knowledge in person.
they need to pull or push that squeegee live.
Okay, all right. Well, we won't get into that debate. All right, for me, coming up here in about 20 minutes here at 11:30 a.m. Center of the Universe time, Central Standard Time, catch The Half with Eric Campbell and I, our show producer here. We do a 30-minute, like no overtime, no nothing. 30-minute cuts off no matter what, and it's actually becomes a lot of fun seeing who's going to get cut off in the middle of over talking. And so we do that as just an open Q&A. We have an opportunity to interact with everybody that comes and watches that live. So you can check that out over at liveosg.com if you want to see the YouTube side, or you can find that at the Facebook page, facebook.com/Our Success Group Pro. Or you can also find it on all of Eric's channels as well, ericcampbell.com. Well, not on the website specifically, but I imagine there's probably a link there knowing Eric. But you can look for him on YouTube and Facebook as well. So catch it any one of those places. So that's, again, coming up in about 20 minutes here. Terry, you mentioned the DAX show. So I've got 2 sessions there. I'll just briefly share what the 2 sessions are. Conquering Fear and Living to Tell About It. And then also finding your niche for more success. So how to find your niche is what we'll be talking about there, not specific sharing niche marketing ideas. We do lots of that here on Two Regular Guys, but right. I'm going to help try to figure out an easy formulated way for you to find your niche. So within those 2 things, what I'm most excited about though is, like you said, Terry, you've got a fantastic class. We're checking out Eric. And then there's some new speakers that we don't normally see at a lot of trade shows. We're going to have Ali Banholzer coming on and presenting a couple of classes, actually, Business by the Numbers being one of them. Dave Harding is going to be talking about equipment financing. We've got Vic Autry from iPersonalize talking about a couple of subjects. Christine Shreve, regular DAX contributor. Eric Campbell, as you mentioned. Anyhow, why I'm excited about this is if you go to daxshow.com, you can register for those classes. They are surprisingly affordable. I've actually said to Scott, you should probably bump those prices up a little bit, but they're going to hold true to that. And so go over and sign up for those. Sign up for as many classes. In fact, the more you sign up for, the cheaper they become. So really want to encourage people to go over there and check that out. And then last but not least, I've got Small Business Saturdays coming up tomorrow morning. Won't worry too much about that. That's for our Success private members group in the live format. So you can, if you're a member, you can check that out tomorrow morning. We'll be talking about 5 tips to be more focused, used by successful people. And if you do want to check out the podcast version, that is still free and open and available to everybody. It just posts the episodes about 3 to 5 months later, depending on how things go. So that can be found at Small Business Saturdays with an S, Small Business Saturdays with an S, podcast.com. And then the other thing happening today is Eric Campbell's got his Take Up episode number 56 happening at 2:30 Mountain Time today. And today it's Design Deconstruction 1, Simple to Complex. And you can find it right there on the screen where you can check that out at ericcampbell.com. So make sure you're tuning into that. Always great feedback from folks about how much they learn on the Take Up. So Eric does a great job, and that's completely free content, folks. So don't miss that. Make sure you're tuned in. If you are an embroiderer or want to know anything about embroidery, that's the best place to go. And then, as I mentioned, Eric is also presenting at DAX from creative hobby to cottage industry and everyday e-commerce for embroiderers. So anything else that we missed there, Terry? Otherwise, I think we've done it, right?
I think we have wrapped it up. Another Excellent. Great episode, 9 years in.
Yep, exactly. Great episode, 9 years in. Thank you very much to Ray and Jim for joining us today. Make sure you go check out all the resources that are available over there at Printing United Alliance, as well as at ColorCaster and from Jim, and check out his podcast at, let me just make sure I get it right. I'm scrolling up real quick because I know it's in here. Where did I put it? Sorry. It's at DyeSubcast. I almost said podcast. So it's DYESUBCAST.com. So check out that over there, and we appreciate their time today.
All right, and we also want to thank our show producer, Eric Campbell, for all the work he does and keeping things running smoothly, mostly in the background, sometimes in the foreground.
Yes, indeed. So thank you very much, Eric. And then Terry, next week, new twist on the Women in Garment Decorating podcast. So instead of kind of turning over the microphones completely, Terry and I are going to be interviewing women from our industry. Next week's discussion is business in a post-COVID world. So we're finalizing another guest or two, but we'll be joined for sure by a good friend of the show, Mel Lay, who's with All Made Apparel. And so Mel, and then we've got a couple of other folks that we're working on, at least one more guest. So we can round out the show and get some fantastic perspectives. So I'm really looking forward to that, Terry.
Yeah, me as well. Until then, I'm Terry Combs. He's Aaron Montgomery.
And we are the Two Regular Guys.
Here we go. Here we go. We're out.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Two Regular Guys. Check out our website at tworegularguys.com. That's the number 2, regularguys.com. You can also interact with us over at our Facebook page, facebook.com/tworegularguys, or send us a tweet, twitter.com/tworegularguys. And we have a YouTube page. You can find all that from our website, tworegularguys.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to spending some time with you again next week.